Hello, I'm Brian, and this is...
Not Brian.
We are from Red Fang, and you are listening to Hedflow.
Thanks a lot for receiving us. To start, I'd like to know something about your musical background. Like, how was it your first contact with music, the first instrument, and was there any life-changing album that is still relevant to you nowadays?
I think the first exposure to music would, obviously as a kid, my parents listened to music. So my mother played piano and sang in choir, so I guess I was exposed to music before I could speak, First instrument, I would probably the piano, because it was in the house, so I was probably plinking just to plink. But then I guess the first formal instrument maybe was in preschool. And we had, plastic recorders, it must have been horrible for the music teacher to listen to, 4 or 5 year olds going, loo, loo, loo. Oh my God, talk about a commitment to the children.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And the life-changing album?
I guess as far as getting into playing hard rock music, it would still have to be Ride the Lightning.
Flash before my eyes. Now it's time to die.
Can remember the life-changing album. That it was probably the one that got me into really interested in playing guitar and feeling like I can actually do a band was probably it was Soundgarden, Louder Than Love. But really, it was like Metallica led to Soundgarden, Louder Than Love, led to Mudhoney, and Mudhoney was sort of like, oh, I can do this. So it was like Superfuzz Big Muff was kind of like the record that made me feel like, and we were covering Soundgarden songs in my first band. We were covering Mudhoney songs, and although Metallica kind of inspired me to be in that sort of world of hard rock, I was like, I can't play like that though. So I would read interviews with James Hetfield where he's like, I only use the bottom 3 strings anyway, like the biggest 3 strings.
Yeah.
So I was like, yes, I'll be a rhythm guitarist. But then it wasn't until Mudhoney that I realized that I could actually do it.
Oh God, how I love to hate. Sliding in and out of grace.
And then what was the first one? The first
instrument. Did you choose it yourself, or was it
piano? Yeah, I chose piano. Yeah, yeah. So it was, my parents were kind enough to go and buy, I don't know how much it was back then, but they did buy a little piano, an upright piano that they put in the basement. So that was how I got into actually playing music.
Murder the Mountains, I think it was an album that is really strong in your guys' career because you went out on tour with Mastodon and later on with Black Tusk. Is there something memorable to share on those tours? How important it was to Red Fang?
Well, I think being invited out to open for Mastodon was huge. We are compared to them sometimes, which surprises me because I think their music is way more intense, more technically involved, and I don't really think we sound like them, but I think that what we do appeals to fans of Mastodon. So the crowds were very receptive, and I think that was a really big step. It was a very generous thing for them to have us go out, and I think it to let people know that we existed, which is good.
Yeah, was not planned originally. We were just going to go out and be first of 3 with them and Dillinger in the U.S. And then they liked the bill so much, they said, all right, we're going to ask both these guys out over to Europe with us too. And Dillinger couldn't do the European part, so we ended up doing main support, and this is pretty early on in as a band. So when we already had that Black Tusk tour booked, when we got the Mastodon tour, and it was like doing okay in sales, and as soon as that Mastodon tour thing happened, the Black Tusk tour, like most of the tour was then sold out after that. So that was super critical for at least like people knowing who we were. It was like exactly the right time. There's lots of memorable moments, but even just cramming 11 of us into a 9-seat Sprinter van and having to do overnights with us like sleeping on the floor and tucked into the wheel well, and then we ended that one, and that was the first time we played in Moscow, was the end of that tour. I think that Black Tusk didn't do those shows with us, but the first time in Moscow was just one of the craziest shows that we ever played, where there's like basically a queue of people waiting to stage dive, and there was that kid who got his hair stuck in your
I felt bad because our tour manager was basically was side stage
Security.
And there were so many people stage diving that he's like, I have to get these people off, because it's just going to be, you're not going to be able to see the band anymore. It's just going to be all these people waiting to jump off the stage. So anyway, so if people were hanging out too long, it was fine. We don't mind if people do that, but we don't encourage it because it's dangerous. But one kid was like standing next to me, and he was going to stage dive, but he had hair that whipped into my tuning pegs of my guitar. And I was like, oh, and I was trying to get it back, but it was really in there. Anyway, our stage manager did not realize that what was going on. That was why the kid was up there. So he helped the guy off the stage. Anyway, I could almost hear the hair ripping out of his skull over the music. I was like, oh. And afterwards, I had to use pliers to get all the hair out. It was gross.
Yeah.
Probably hurt.
Poor kid. Oh, I bet it hurt like crazy.
When you guys present your art, like in video clips, you tend to go more to the comic side. Heavy bands, sometimes they tend to go more morbid and stuff, and you guys choose the comic side, at least in video clips. And how was this decision, and why did you choose to be this way?
The first video, which was done by our friend Whitey, fit with our lifestyle and who we were at the time, and fit with the song. And he just has way more of his approach as a director is just what's going to be a thing that's like funny to him and would get his attention. And so that kind of set the tone, and we didn't really want to, we loved working with him, and he was obviously like pretty important in anyone ever having heard of us. So we trusted what he did, and we liked what he did. And yeah, there's moments with some of the newer songs, like by the time Only Ghosts rolled around, we had some tracks that were like pretty personal and pretty dark, and it was like, I don't know if we can really do like a silly video for this particular song. Mm-hmm. Luckily, we didn't, the choice never came up. Yeah. So it just, has worked out that, yeah, there's a lot of darkness in the lyrics, and there's a lot of seriousness about life, but still there's always comedy and humor, like if you just focus on just the dark and the serious and the bummery stuff, then you're ignoring a huge part of what life is actually about. So yeah, we feel like it's pretty appropriate to mix the two, to mix dark lyrics and ridiculous video subjects. So whatever.
It's also a survival technique, I think, for us. Yeah. On tour, we're sometimes, in uncomfortable situations. So it's, you're not at home. Your accommodations may be cramped or bizarre, whatever. But so you might start going kooky. But I think we all try to cut each other up with jokes as much as possible, just to
release the tension.
Release the tension, exactly. If you don't laugh, you'll cry.
There is one common thing that people who love stoner music and sludge music, they tend to like the psychotropic side of stuff. Do you guys think it is an important phase of life to use this to expand the consciousness?
I don't think any kind of medication of any kind is necessary. I think music is its own sort of transportation thing. Although, I mean, I am a fan of psychedelic drugs because I do believe that they help expand your mind. It helps you think, you know, more outside of what you're, you know. I mean,
you decided reality might be.
Yes, your idea of reality becomes larger.
It might not be the case for everyone. I personally feel like trying something like mushrooms once at least is a pretty darn good idea for most people, because I think a lot of people actually see, even people who are like, oh, I'd never touch drugs. Like, sure, stay away from all of the stupid ones, you know, don't do heroin or cocaine or the things that aren't going to actually, they make you feel good, sure, but they're not going to do anything for your perception of reality or give you a different perspective. Like, I think traveling is really important. I think that if you feel like you can tolerate doing something like mushrooms, start with a tiny amount, because you can even do a very small amount and it will still do something, and you won't run the risk of like having a bad trip. I think it's good for almost anyone to do that kind of stuff, unless you have some sort of like chemical thing that the doctor would be like, no, you shouldn't do that. But I feel like I try to once a year do a trip out to the coast in Washington and do that with my girlfriend, and I think it's super good for our relationship. I think it's really good for people who have issues with depression.
When I was a kid, I used to do like take mushrooms and play guitar, but oftentimes what it would end up doing is I had like a PV backstage that had a distortion and a really strong reverb tank, and I would just tune the strings down as low as they would go, and then just
You went through 5 capitals in Brazil. What was the impression of Brazilians on that trip? Because we were facing like a transition in government. It's similar to what you guys found in the US with Trump. Some headbangers in Brazil, they are like supporting Bolsonaro. So it's like any strange phase. Did you guys feel any of this?
I generally try not to get way too deep into religion or politics with people. It's, you know, because it I'm interested in those things, but I think everyone's entitled to their own opinion, and oftentimes it just devolves, and then once you start, you can't get out.
Anywhere you go, when you just go to a rock club and play a show for people, mostly it's just a bunch of metalheads, you know, like drinking beer and watching a show, and there's gonna be a mix of different political ideas, all of them. I was pretty surprised when we played the Mayhem Festival to see how much like right wing. I just assumed that all metalheads were like, you know, progressive lefties like I was. Yeah. But they're not, and whatever, it's totally fine. There's no problem with that at all. I just like, it was just a little bit surprising to me, but you basically just don't really talk about it. You just kind of bond over the music, and then
I think that's a good point. I think that's, I mean, you have people that are left-leaning, right-leaning, or whatever, but they get in a room and they're all enjoying the same band, and so I think that's what the world needs more of, is people that are bonding over some, like a mutual enjoyment of one thing.
Well, and realizing that they're not as different as they think they're like, you know, people start to feel like, well, I don't, you know, they're just like these people on the right, they're idiots, they just don't understand anything, and then you realize that you're actually friends with one, you know, but you have no idea because you actually like the same things and whatever. It's just like a thing about the way they were raised or the way their brains are wired, that they happen to feel different ways about taxes or whatever.
Thanks a lot for receiving us again. I wish you guys a great concert tonight.
Thank you.
People are going to love it for sure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you.